7th grade math, test 7, study guide. Problem number 1. A factory worker can package 208 games in 16 minutes. And unless they tell us otherwise, we always put time on the bottom, right? Money's always on top, time is always on the bottom, unless they tell us otherwise. How many games can he package per minute? How many games can he package per minute is a unit rate, so I just divide in and out. 16 goes into 21 time. Subtract. Drop one digit down. 16 goes into 48 3 times. And the answer is 13 games, whatever's on top, per minute. Whatever's on the bottom, it's each per each one of these. That's what they mean by unit, 1 unit. Okay. Alright, so number 1 is 13 games per minute. Number 2, table below is proportional. All ratios are equivalent. So if you ever have a test question that asks you about direct variation, it means the same thing. It means proportional. How many grams of raisins are there for each gram of peanuts? So each gram of peanuts means peanuts goes on the bottom. So I just take, since these are going to all be equivalent ratios, I have to put raisins on top and peanuts on the bottom this time. Okay, so they said each gram of peanuts, peanuts goes on the bottom. If they said each gram of raisins, raisins would go on the bottom. So I just take any point that you like. I'll take the first one, 3.72 over peanuts on the bottom, 1.2. So again, we just divide, we go in and out. When we're dividing decimals, we have to clear the decimal for the divisor, and so we have to move it also for the dividend the same number of times and bring it up top. So now 12 doesn't go into 3, so don't put your first digit there. 12 goes into 37. This is where your first number has to go. So we can try it 3 times. That's 36. Subtract, bring one digit down, right, one at a time, and 12 goes into 12 one time. So the answer is 3.1, and the question was how many grams? Oh, so it's 3.1 grams. So it's 3.1 grams of raisins for every single gram of peanuts. Again, this is still just unit rate that we're finding. So we divide. Number 3. Tony and Tiffany are collecting stones. Tiffany paid $48. 4 means over or slash for 8 pounds. There's an abbreviation for pounds, right? And Tony, so this is Tiffany. We'll call her Tiff. Tony, we'll call him Tone. Tone, he paid $21 for or over 4 pounds. Okay, so they said, who has the better buy? In other words, who has the lowest units rate? So again, same thing over and over again. I just divide top by bottom. Okay, 8 goes into 48. Let's see. How many times? Let's see. How about 5 is, whoa, it's exactly 6 times, isn't it? Over here, 21 divided by 4. 4 goes into 21. Well, 7 is 28, right? So it's got to be 6 is 24. So it's got to be 5 times. And you know what? I'm going to stop. I'm not going to continue dividing that, because I know that 5 and some change, or 5 with some stuff left over, is automatically smaller than 6. So what that means is this is less. Tone, my main man Tone, he paid less. He had the better unit rate. Number 4. Simplify. We have 3/4 in parentheses. What? Over 2/5 in parentheses. Oh my land. So all that means is you got 3/4 stays together. That's what the parentheses means. Let's try to make it easier for you there by putting parentheses around it. Okay. Thank you, Tanner, for the advice there. So I got divided by over here 2/5. So dividing by fractions means to multiply by the reciprocal. So this becomes times. We flip this upside down. We can do our factor trees, cancel out our 1s, and multiply. But I know this is 2 times 2. There's only 2's on the bottom. There's no 2's up top. So all I have to do is multiply these 2, and I automatically have a reduced answer because of factor trees and cross out my 1's. So the answer is 15/8. And if I didn't see 15/8 as an answer, then I would convert, right? It's already simplified. I would convert it to an improper, a mixed number by dividing in and out, subtracting, take my remainder, put it here, divisor on the bottom. Alright, next problem. Number 5. So number 5 says an animal can walk 2.5 miles in means slash or over 3 hours. Find its unit rate. Again, that means normally I go in and out, right? Because I'm taking this and I'm dividing it by this. However, this time I have fractions. So I don't divide fractions the way I divided these numbers over here where I go in and out. I have to divide them the other way. Another way of dividing is by multiplying by reciprocal. So I have to take my mixed numbers and make them into fractions. So I go 2 times 2 is 4, and then I add plus 1 is 5. So I got 5, keep the same bottom number. 5 over 2 divided by 3/4. These two are the same. So we never change that front number, right? If I want to divide another way because they're fractions, then I multiply by the reciprocal. I flip the second one, right? Now I have to reduce this, so I have 5 times 2. Another way to say 4 is 2 times 2. So these are all prime numbers. I can't cross out my 1s. And so when I'm done, this is automatically a reduced number. This is simplified. However, they put it as a mixed number because it's a word problem, so it makes more sense to convert it this time. We don't always have to do that. So I go 3 times 3 is 9. I take my remainder, put it up top, and 3 1/3 miles per hour makes a little more sense than 10/3 miles per hour, even though they're the same thing. There's our answer, number 6. So number 6 says, which of the following ratios forms a proportion with 3/7? So number 6, they give us the fraction 3/7, and then they give us 4 more fractions. And one of these is proportional to 3/7. In other words, one of these is the same fraction as 3/7. So all we got to do is, you can do two things. You can reduce all these and see if you get 3/7. Or you can take them and you can write a proportion with them and see if this times this equals this times this. You can do that with all of them. And if that's true, there's your answer. Okay? Now the third option is this. Another thing that's true about proportional ratios is that whatever I multiply to get here, I have to multiply the same to get here. And that's probably the fastest way to do it. So if I'm looking at 3/7, I look at your numerators, your top numbers. 3 times 10 is 30. So if I take 7 times 10 and get 70, there's my answer. Okay? Look at the next one. 3 times 5 is 15. So I have to multiply the bottom by 5 also because it's got to be equivalent. 5 times that is not 42. That doesn't work, right? Over here, 3 times 5 is 15. On the bottom, I have to multiply by 5 also. They don't. They multiply by 4. So there's a couple ways to do that, right? And again, let me explain this way if you prefer this way. So I can multiply 3 times 70 to get 210, or 7 times 30 to get 210. So this is my answer right here. This fraction makes a proportion with this. In other words, it's an equivalent ratio. Number 7. A car travels 72 miles on 6 gallons means over 6 gallons. At that rate, how much gas would it need to travel 204 miles? In other words, at that rate means make it proportional. So for 204 miles, remember, put miles at miles and gallons at gallons. If we don't know gallons, that's where we put our variable. So we again, just like up here, we cross multiply. I got 72 times x, which is 72x. And then I have 6 times 204 over here. 6 times 204, which is 1224. Now I divide both sides by the coefficient. In other words, I divide the number in front of x, not the other number by itself. So we divide by the coefficient, not the constant. Cancel out my 1's. And I have 124 divided by 72. So that's where we go in and out, just like all the other problems, right? We divide in and out. Now 72 doesn't go into 1. We don't start there, or 12. But it does go into 122. So this is where our first number has to go. That's where some of you are still getting this wrong, is you're not putting the number in the right spot when you divide. So 72 times what is 122? Well, I know 70 times 2 would be 140. That's too much, so I'll try 1. And I subtract. Now, if I subtract these, borrow there, if I subtract these, and I see that this is larger than this, that means I have to change that number, right? So, I subtracted. Now I have to remember, I always drop down 1 digit after I subtract. So, 72 into 504, kind of hard to do, so I'll take one digit off on the end to get me in the ballpark. 7 into 50 is easier. That's like 7 times. So I'll multiply this by 7, 72 times 7. I get 14, 49, 50. Oh, hit the nail on the head. So the answer is 17. 17 what? X stood for gallons, so 17 gallons is the answer. 17 gallons. Okay? And I hope we're always checking our answers after each problem, right? And when we do one wrong, we go back and do it again till we get it right. We don't leave it wrong. All right, number 8. The ratio of girls to boys in a building is 5 to 3. It's 5 to 3, okay? This is girls, right? That's a symbol for girls, and this is boys. There's our ratio. So how many girls are there if there is a total of 200 boys? So they want to know girls to total. So I have to convert this ratio so it's girls, which is 5, to total. Total means 5 plus 8. I got to add those two. Whenever they say the word total, we got to add something. So I got 5 to 8, or 5 over 8, will be proportional to girls, which is, we don't know, because it says how many girls, right? And then it says a total of 200 girls and boys. So the total goes here. So I got girls to total, girls to total. Keep girls to girls, total with total. Going to solve this proportion, cross multiply. 5 times 200 is 1,000. 8 times 8 is 8x. Divide both sides. And now we're going to round to the nearest whole number, I assume. Here, let me check the answer. Yep, we're rounding to the nearest whole number, if necessary. 8 goes into 1,000 one time. Subtract, bring down one digit. 8 goes into 22 times. Subtract, bring down one digit. And 8 goes into that evenly. So 125 girls is how many there would be out of 200 kids for a ratio of 5 to 3 girls to boys. Next problem, number 9. A car used 8 gallons of gas to travel 204 miles. So we usually use miles per gallon in our society, right? So I'll put miles on top. Miles per gallon mean miles on top. Miles per 8 gallons, you don't have to do it this way. I just like to do it that way. How many gallons would be used to travel 30 miles? So 30 miles goes there. Now, they didn't say total this time. Whoops, you know what? I am skipping a problem. Lo siento, excuse me, pardoname. This is actually number 10 that I'm doing, so let me backtrack. Let me back that thing up here. We're going to go to 9, because that was 10. The problem is they almost look like the exact same problem. I tricked myself there. Number 9 says 8 gallons of gas for 204 miles, so I'll put miles on top, gallons on the bottom, and number 9 says this. How many total? And I just told you, when there's total, you have to add something. Gallons were used to travel an additional 30 miles. So we're not going 30 miles like problem number 10 here. We're going 204 plus an additional, addition means add, additional 30. So we're going 234 miles. And they said how many gallons, so that's where my variable goes. So you see number 9 we had to add because they said an additional, and they said the word total. So we multiplied 204 times x is 204x. 234 times 8, go over here, I got 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 24 plus 3 is 27. 8 times 2 is 16 plus 2 is 18. So 1,872 divided by 204. Okay. And then I go over here, I go in and out. 1872 divided by 204. 204 doesn't go into 18 or 187. It does, so our first number has to go right there. Okay, I'll put a decimal just in case. So I can start taking one digit off, one digit off. How about 20 into 187? Still a little confusing, not really, but maybe for some. So I'll take off 2 digits. How about 2 into 18? Now that's about 9 times. So let me test 9. That's where my starting point. So I'm going to take 204 and multiply it times 9. That's 36. Carry my 3. 9 times 0 is 0 plus the 3 is 3. And then I get my 18 there. 1836. Subtract these two. Okay, put that 3 down there. 6. Add a 0 because I put a decimal. Put the decimal up top though. Now I can drop it down. 204 goes into 360 one time, because I know 200 times 2 is 400. That's already too big, so one time. I'm going to stop right there, because that's enough to round. Okay, it says round to the nearest whole number if necessary. If I'm rounding to the nearest whole number, it either stays 9 or it rounds up to 10. Depends on if it's closer to 9 or closer to 10. And 9.1 is way over here. It's not closer to 10. If it's 9.5 or higher, I round up. So I say about 9. So the answer for number 9 is about 9 gallons. Now let's do number 10. Number 10. I wanted to do that earlier. I'm so excited about this problem. It says 204 miles this time per 8 gallons. Same as the last problem, right? They look like the same exact thing. Look at those two. Okay? But the difference is this time they say how many gallons would be used to travel 30 miles. They didn't say an additional, or they didn't use the word total. They just said 30 miles, period. So that's the difference. This time I didn't have to add. This time I did, because they didn't say total or additional. So I do the same procedures for solving this. 8 times 30 is 240. 204 times x is 204x. Divide these two, and x goes into 240. It's going to be one time, but we're going to round to the nearest gallon, so I have to see if it's 1.5 or higher or 1.4 or lower. So I'll put my decimal here. 1 time, subtract. The difference between these two is 36. Drop a 0 down, because I put my decimals, I can do that. And it's still, that only goes into that, so it's like 1.1, which means about 1 gallon. So the answer would be about 1 gallon for this one. About 1 gallon. Number 11. Number 11 says, find the constant rate of change if necessary, round to the nearest tenths. Okay? Constant rate of change. Now, we could do minutes over feet, or feet over minute. But if you look in your answers, I'm only going to do feet over minute. Okay, so there's more than one correct answer here. However, if I'm asking you for feet per minute, because in our society we always put time on the bottom. Time decides things, so time's on the bottom. On the bottom of the rate, not on the bottom of the table, right? Top of the table means bottom of the rate. Top of the table means bottom of the rate. So I'm going to do feet per minute. I'm going to put feet on top. 5 over 10, that's 1/2. 10 over 20, that's 1/2. 15 over 30, that's 1/2. So what's the constant rate of change? 1/2 feet per minute. 1/2 feet per minute. 1/2 feet per every single 1 minute. Number 12. We have Juan earns $11 per hour. That's a unit rate. In which ordered pair would not appear on a graph. Okay, so on a graph, every hour that goes by, it goes up $11. So in other words, this is a proportional relationship. So any set of coordinates I get, if I put y over x, I should get 11. Okay? So we're looking for the one that does not appear, right? 33 over 3 is 11. 55 over 5 is 11. 11 over 1 is 11. 22 over 4 is not 11. 22 over 2 is 11. So the answer is D. Number 13. Which value would complete the table to make the relationship proportional? So if these are all proportional, we need to know what goes right here with 3. I just write a proportion. So I'll pick any set of coordinates. I'll take 1, 23.4. So I'll put y over x, and then over here I have to remember to put y over x too. And y, we don't know what it is. It's a question mark, so I'll use a variable. The variable stands for a missing value, right? Over x, over 3. That's all I did. And it wouldn't matter which points I picked, okay? I'm just solving this proportion. Now, 1 times y is y, and then I multiply these two. When I'm multiplying decimals, that's not when I line my decimals up. That's when I'm adding or subtracting, right? Instead, I just pretend there aren't any decimals. So I multiply, I get 12, 10, and 7. And then I count my decimal spaces. There's 1 here and none here. So I start on the right and add 1. 70 and 2/10 is the answer for 13. 14, write the equation. This is a straight line that goes to the origin. Equation's always the same. This equals rate times this, right? This equals rate times this. So this is dog, so I'll say D. D equals rate times cats, or rate times C. So all we got to do is find the rate. Okay, so this one equals rate times this one. Okay, that's always true if it's a straight line that goes to the origin. Okay, and we talked more about what that actually means in class, but we're just trying to get to the study guide here. So we'll find a point on the graph and get the coordinates. The coordinates here are 2, 3. Or I can use this one, 4, 6. I'm going to get the same answer either way. So I'll use 2, 3. The coordinates are 2, 3. To get that rate, I simply put y over x. So the equation is d equals 3/2 c. 15. It says every Monday through Friday, a student spends 40% of the time sleeping, 30% of the time at school, 8% of the time practicing sports. The rest is various other activities. What percent is various other? This is really as easy as adding these up and subtracting it from 100. Okay, and our answer is 22%. Okay? Number 16. Number 16 says, if you scored 15 out of 20, what's your grade? So 16, 15 out of 20 means 15 over 20, right? What's your grade mean? What's the percent? We use percent proportion. Is over of, 15 is 20%, what percent of 20? Or part over whole. Whole means all the test questions possible. If we don't know percent, that's where we put our x. Percent always goes over 100. We cross multiply and divide. And this, remember, we got 0, 0. We can cross those out. So when I divide those in and out, half of 250 is going to be 75. It's a 75%. Now, we got to look on our chart. 75% is a C. Next problem, 17. What number is 35% of 210? It goes is over of, right? Part over whole. So 35%, if they give me percent, that always goes over 100 because that's a definition of percent. How many out of 100? Of 210 means I got of, I don't have is. So again, I'm using my percent proportion, cross multiply. That's an x. Sorry about that. That's an x right there. And I got 210 times 35. So I have 5 times 0, 5 times 1, and 5 times 2. Skip a space. 3 times 0, 3 times 1, 3 times 2. Add. 7,350 divided by 100. Well, the nice thing about dividing by 100 is I simply move the decimal 2 times, so I got 73.5. Right? 1, 2. That's how I divide by 100. Or you can do the long division if you'd like. So the answer for 17 is 73 and 5/10. 18. 20 is 40% of one number. Remember, it goes is over of equals percent over 100. So 18, 20 is, so I have is, I don't have of this time. Percent always goes over 100. Cross multiply, so that's 2 times 1 with 3 zeros. 40 times x is 40x. Divide by the coefficient, divide by the number in front of x. If you got zeros, you can cross those out when we're dividing only, when we're dividing. And then I go 200 divided by 4, you can go in and out. 200 divided by 4 is going to be 50. Number 19. 19 says the average student sends 100 to 130 texts, and I know that doesn't sound reasonable now, but when smartphones first came out, that was accurate data back then. 100 to 130 texts each day. 10% are sent to parents. 10% to parents. And it says, how many texts does the average student send to parents each day? In other words, what's the range? So what we do is we find 10% of 100 and 10% of 130, and that's our range. Again, just percent proportion. So I go, I'm finding 10% of 100. I put is over of, percent over 100. I go 100 times x is 100x. 100 times 10 is 1,000. Divide both sides by 100, which simply means I move the decimal 2 times or cross out those zeros. So on the low end, there was 10 texts a day, 10 out of 100. That's 10% of 100, right? On the high end, I do the same thing. I go is over of, I put the number of texts on the bottom, 10% on top, okay? And I go 100 times x equals 130 times 10, which just means add a 0. Divide by 100 simply means move the decimal 1, 2 times, or 13 texts. My range is 10 to 13 texts. And the last one, number 20. It says if a truck, same type of question, right? This time it's 20 to 40 gallons. and it's 5%. And then they say, what's the range for 3 trucks? So it's just like this problem, but we got to multiply by 3 in the end. So I find, and we're using 5% instead of 10%. I'm finding 5% of 20 and 5% of 40. So again, percent proportion, I go 5% of 20 means of on the bottom, 5% over 100. Okay, over here, 5% of 40 looks like this. Cross multiply 100x times 100. Divide both sides, move the decimal 2 times, I get x is 1. Over here, cross multiply 100 times x is 100x. Cross multiply here, I get 200. Divide by 100 means move the decimal 2 times. So my range is 1 to 2 gallons for air conditioning, but there's 3 trucks. So times 3, I multiply this by 3, I get 3. Multiply this by 3, I get 3 to 6 gallons is my answer. Alright, hope that helped.